Welcome to The Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with a taste of the main news items in the global economy. In today's magazine, Nintendo's Game Boy celebrates its 25-year anniversary, and Bangladesh industrial disaster remains largely unresolved. First, the headlines. Pharmacy giants Novartis and GSK agreed to swap assets in a multi-billion-dollar deal, pooling their consumer products in a new joint venture. GSK will sell its portfolio of cancer drugs to Novartis for at least $14.5 billion and buy the Swiss group's vaccines unit for $5.25 billion. The companies will combine their consumer healthcare businesses in a joint venture controlled by GSK. Separately, Novartis will also sell its animal health business to Eli Lilly for $5.4 billion. Novartis hopes the deals will help improve its financial strength as it sharpens its focus. Russia's finance ministry said the country could tip into recession in the second quarter of 2014. The Russian economy contracted by around 0.5% in the first 3 months of the year. A senior finance ministry official said it does not rule out a technical recession, as it forecasts negative growth for the second quarter as well. Even before Russia's standoff with the West, Russian growth was starting to slow due to internal problems such as slowing consumer spending, sagging investment, and weakening demand for its energy export. U.S. drivers face rising gas prices as a new pipeline sells growing amounts of oil to refineries on the Gulf Coast that churn out gasoline and diesel. Total petroleum exports, mostly gasoline and diesel, averaged about 3.6 million barrels a day last week, up 25% from the same period last year. Gasoline stockpiles nationwide are at their lowest point for this time of year since 2011. The retail price for a gallon of regular gasoline averaged $3.68 on Monday, up 4.2% from a year ago. Gasoline futures climbed 1.1% a gallon on the New York Mercantile Exchange, and they're up 11% for the year. Chinese internet company Tencent plans to sell benchmark-sized dollar bonds with maturities of 3 and 5 years. Though it's unclear how much Tencent aims to raise, it recently established a program enabling it to issue up to $5 billion in bonds over the next year. Benchmark-sized bonds normally refer to at least $500 million. The sale comes as Tencent is on an acquisition binge to compete with rival Alibaba Group Holdings. Strong demand from global investors has greatly boosted foreign ownership of Spanish government debt to a near 3-year high. Foreign holdings of Spanish government bonds have increased by more than 70 billion euros since early 2012 to 182 billion euros. Yields on Spanish 10-year bonds fell below 3.1% last week, the lowest since 2005. Yields on 5-year Spanish bonds, meanwhile, fell below those on U.S. Treasuries of equivalent maturity. In Eurozone periphery countries, the drop in bond yields, which move inversely to bond prices, follow expectations of more asset purchases by the European Central Bank to curb deflation. East Asia might become Israel's second largest export market, overtaking the United States. The Economy Ministry predicts a 4.7% rise in Israel's exports to East Asia this year, the largest increase for any of the world's regions. Last year, Israeli exports to East Asia accounted for 21% of overseas sales, equal to those to the United States, which have been declining consistently. But two companies, Intel and Israel Chemicals, account for much of Israel's Asian exports. Intel, which has major semiconductor manufacturing facilities in the south of the country, accounted for half of Israel's exports to China last year. The Game Boy ruled the portable gaming market for many years, but with the dawn of the mobile age, its market share has steadily declined. Joan Citruk and Daniel Roth have more in this report.
It was 25 years ago this week that Nintendo released the premier pocket game console of its time. On April 21, 1989, the black and white screen and electronic melodies of Nintendo's Game Boy kickstarted a revolution.
They were amazing, although the screen is very, very small, and they are very, very different from the kind of games that we have nowadays. but I think we like them as much as people enjoy them now.
With its simple and addictive games, Game Boy effectively seduced consumers of all ages.
The Game Boy just blew the competition absolutely out of the water. It was so much more successful than any of the other products that their competitors had at that time. And I think that at some point, the portable gaming was synonymous with Game Boy.
But despite their success throughout the 1990s with various editions, Nintendo is no longer the market leader in portable consoles. Today, there are smartphones and tablets that have taken over, and the multiple interfaces on which to develop games is indeed profitable.
The cost of creating a game for smartphone and tablet is much, much lower. You know, even for $1 or $2 million, you can start to build a significant game or title, whereas the production costs in console gaming were much, much higher.
Even in the area of home consoles, despite the success of Wii, a console that can detect the movement of players, Nintendo has been overtaken by another Japanese company, Sony's PlayStation, as well as Microsoft's Xbox.
An evolution of what's possible from games platforms will lie more in the favour of these big players who have these big customer data, big sets of customers and also big data. And so companies like Nintendo have to really make some very quick changes or maybe reposition.
And those changes come often in the world of video games. In late January, Nintendo announced an 8% fall in its turnover between April and December 2013. And though the outlook for the year may be challenging, it's not game over yet for Nintendo.
1 year after the Rana Plaza garment factory in Bangladesh collapsed, killing more than 1,000 workers, survivors are still struggling to rebuild their lives. And pressure builds on Western clothing brands to take financial responsibility for the country's worst ever industrial disaster. Here's more.
It's taken months for Rihanna to learn how to walk again. She lost her legs when the Rana Plaza factory building where she worked outside Dhaka collapsed a year ago. As she rebuilds her life, she's struggling to come to terms with a tragedy that could have been avoided.
It makes me so angry, because if the owners knew that something was wrong with the 5th floor of the building, and they saw me going to the 10th floor, they still didn't warn us. They didn't close down the garment factory. They even told us, this building will stand for another 10 years, and nothing will happen to it.
More than 1,100 garment workers were killed, and another 2,000 injured when the 9-story building caved in. Most victims were making clothes for Western brands, such as Britain's Primark and Spanish chain Mango. International pressure on retailers to take financial responsibility has fallen short. Contributions to a fund set up to compensate victims have reached less than half its target, and many victims have found themselves ineligible to receive any money. But there have been some improvements. The government has raised the minimum wage by 77% to $68 a month, eased laws enabling trade unions, and increased factory inspections.
All our efforts are to prevent another Rana Plaza, another accident, another disaster. So I'm sure the brands and buyers also are putting their efforts to ensure that their factories, their suppliers are committed to improving the working conditions.
This small factory making jute bags was set up after the disaster to offer jobless survivors the chance to earn a living. Profits here are shared among the staff, and the company strives to provide a better working environment than in the often grueling garment sector.
In garment factories, supervisors often misbehave and spew profanities or slap workers around. Over here, we cannot even imagine something like that. Nothing like that could ever happen here. Plus, there are many who have been on therapy or physiotherapy, so they can take a couple of hours off each day. In any other factory, they would never be given that much time off.
Rihanna would like to go back to work, but she worries she won't get a job because she can't operate foot pedals on a sewing machine. She's received some compensation, but no sum of money will allow her to forget the horrors of that day or bring back all that she lost.
And we're joined now by Daniel Roth for a deeper look into corporate responsibility in Media Watch. Daniel.
Hey.
On a somewhat more somber tone today, with Bangladesh in the back of our minds, what do you have for us?
So The Atlantic had this piece kind of opening the subject a little bit. It's been 4 years approximately since the Deepwater Horizon, the BP oil spill.
Right.
And as we know, it's been 1 year since the Bangladesh factory fire. And so the Atlantic's really talking about kind of the broader picture of corporate social responsibility and more precisely stated, the lack thereof. It's really not present. You've got basically BP a month ago was allowed to start digging in U.S. deep water again.
Right.
Companies are still out there, making clothes in low-wage, low-regulation environments. That's why they're in Bangladesh. It's a $20 billion export industry there.
In all fairness to everybody watching, I mean, we're the ones buying these clothes.
Absolutely. Right. You know, when you look at the labels, the vast majority of labels are coming from places like Bangladesh, where this happens often. Not exactly this level of disaster, but the kind of unsafe conditions and worker abuse is very common. If you go to a site called gapdeathtraps.com, they list it from 2005 till now. Almost 2,000 people have been killed in unsafe working conditions. So it's really not a done deal. The so-called CSR, corporate social responsibility, is not present.
Right. Well, clearly, I mean, like if you look at the manufacturing industry, clothing industry in Bangladesh alone, I mean, it's like $20 billion, if I'm not mistaken. It's unbelievable. I mean, money talks, right?
It's huge. And the Wall Street Journal actually also ran a piece about Nike and the inside, kind of showing this inside story that there are people in Nike kind of pushing for social responsibility. Now, it's cynical and true, though, that their voice is out there in the company because their argument is it's bad for business to have this kind of image of unsafe working conditions and human rights abuses and things like this. So it's not exactly benevolence driving the force. Mind you, even in Nike, where they have someone working on sustainable business culture, they have someone who's a VP of this, they still, 16 Nike suppliers have had major violations in the last decade or so. So it's really not present.
Now, keeping this in mind, given that we know that all these big corporations really ultimately only care about their bottom line, and that a lot of the PR really is bogus. It's just to make everybody else feel good about buying this product. Maybe we should follow a different tack. Maybe we should really just focus on, punishing these companies rather than looking for good signs of goodwill and whatnot.
Right. So, I mean, in the case of BP, they punished them for a couple of years. They said you can't dig in U.S. deep waters. A month ago, they let them go. They're still cleaning up that disaster.
Right.
They're still cleaning it up, and they're already allowed back in. So the punishment isn't really there. Now, India, Forbes had this story about India. They're the first to have a CSR law, a corporate social responsibility law, that will affect 16,000 companies there, both foreign companies operating there and Indian companies. However, it's not really dealing with the kinds of issues we're talking about. What this is really a law saying is if you make a certain level of money, if your net profit was $830,000, I think it was, over the last 3 years, then you have to give about 2% of your net profit to charity. So and this is the first such law, first law referred to as CSR, and it's really not much, is the truth. It's really not addressing the kinds of images we're seeing, 1,100 people dying in a factory fire. Giving to charity, not necessarily going to do it. Now, a company called ZMQ Technologies in India has been giving 12% approximately, not directly to charity, but towards kind of honing in on areas of expertise that they have and sort of in-kind donations and things like this, something Bill Gates has been talking about for years. This, what he calls creative capitalism, not just giving to philanthropic causes, but using your expertise if you're a computer company giving computers. So there are some companies out there trying new things. In this case, they really spearheaded a huge video game focus on AIDS education that seems to have had some success. So things like this are happening. It's but so again,
it's so hard not to be cynical. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well,
even now, billions and billions of dollars in your bank account to say, oh well, now I just don't know what to do with my money anymore. Oh well, let's just give it away because I don't know what to do with it.
Even now, the issue is unsafe working conditions, factory fires, people in the environment really being destroyed by unregulated processes.
Right.
And here we are talking about giving 2% or even 10% to charity. It's not the same issue. One can be good, but they're not really focusing on the task at hand.
Right. Well, thanks, Daniel Roth, for all those insights, and who knows, maybe we'll actually eventually resolve this on the show. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. This is the end of our edition. I'm Benjamin Chong-Alfares. Send us your comments via our website, Facebook, Twitter, and wherever, any other way you want to. We're here, and we'll be here tomorrow.